Officials said the desert shack was empty. But the couple's dog exposed a truth. Buried in the sand, Rex wasn't supposed to bark during the hearing, not in a room full of lawyers and county officials. But the moment the man slipped that folded map under the table, Rex rose, silent first, then shaking, as if he could feel a lie before it was spoken. And when he stepped between the judge and the truth someone meant to bury, the entire room froze. People said it was instinct. Jack said it was loyalty. But later, long after the verdict, when the desert wind finally settled, even the officials admitted something none of them wanted to believe. The dog had seen what every human missed. The Mojave had a way of swallowing sound. Even the old Ford pickup seemed to fall quiet as Jack Harlow steered it deeper into the desert, its cracked windshield catching the last bruised tones of sunset. Beside him, Maria kept both hands on a folded blanket, as if the thin cotton could steady the tremor in her chest. Neither of them had spoken in miles. There was nothing left to say after the way their son had closed the door, refusing to meet their eyes, telling them the house was no longer theirs to come back to. Rex sat upright in the back seat, watching them both as if reading the air. His coat, once dark gold, had faded at the muzzle, but his eyes were the same as when Jack found him 10 years ago working with Border Patrol. Sharp, decisive, hard to ignore. Rex shifted suddenly. A low rumble rose from his throat, not hostile but alert. Jack glanced at the side mirror. Nothing but sand and a sky collapsing into night. Easy, boy. Rex didn't ease. He pressed a paw to the edge of the window and let out a sharp bark, then another, more insistent. Maria straightened. He's telling us to stop. Jack almost laughed at the absurdity. Stop where? They were in a place no map bothered naming. But Rex barked again, then let out a short whine, a sound Jack knew well. This wasn't agitation. It was certainty. Jack pulled over. The truck rolled to a halt beside a dune shaped by wind and time. When the engine stilled, the desert felt even quieter. Rex leapt out before the door fully opened. He ran a tight circle, nose low, tail rigid. Then he sprinted ahead toward a ridge of sunburned rock and vanished behind it. Jack swore under his breath and followed. The sand softened underfoot. Maria walked slower, her knees aching, but she pressed on. When they rounded the ridge, they saw it. A shack. Wood stripped bare by decades of heat, metal roof half torn, windows clouded with dust. It sat as if someone had dropped it from the sky and forgotten it. No footprints, no vehicle tracks, just silence. Rex stood at the doorway, waiting. Jack exhaled. Whoever built this didn't build it recently. But the frame was still standing. The desert had taken almost everything, yet it hadn't taken this. They stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with old sand and the faint hint of cedar. There was one room, a cot, a rusted lantern, a coffee can of nails, nothing else. But it was shelter. And for the first time since their son turned them away, Maria let her shoulders drop. "We'll stay just tonight," Jack said. Rex didn't lie down. He paced the perimeter of the shack, nose testing each corner, ears pricked toward the desert outside. When the night wind rose, he pressed closer to the door, body tense. Jack watched him from the cot. "You're seeing something we can't." Rex didn't look back. He didn't need to. They slept lightly, waking often to the groan of sand against the walls. At dawn, a faint hum broke the morning stillness. Not wind, not an animal, an engine. A black SUV crawled toward the shack, raising a trail of dust like smoke behind it. Jack stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the glare. A county emblem glinted on the door. A man in an ironed shirt stepped out, 2 others behind him. "Morning, sir," the man said. His voice was flat, official. "You can't be here." Jack tightened his jaw. "We found this place last night. Didn't know it belonged to anyone. It doesn't belong to anyone, which is exactly the problem. This structure is listed as condemned, unsafe, abandoned. The land is under review for development. You're trespassing. Maria stepped beside Jack. We're not harming anything. We're just passing through, not an option. You need to clear out, today. Rex emerged from behind the shack, slow and controlled, his eyes fixed on the official as if measuring him. A low growl vibrated through the ground beneath Jack's feet. It wasn't loud, but it carried warning. Sir, control your dog, the man said sharply. Jack didn't move. He knows when something isn't right. The official stiffened. He opened a folder, flipping through paperwork with practiced ease. This place is empty. No one has a claim on it. You're leaving. Rex's growl deepened, but his gaze wasn't on the man anymore. His focus shifted past the SUV toward the dunes, toward something none of them could see. Then the moment twisted. The SUV's rear door clicked open. No one had touched it. No breeze was strong enough to do that. The officials turned at the sound. Inside, half hidden under a tarp, was a ground scanner still running. Its display blinked with coordinates. Not empty land, not dead space, survey markers, active. Maria felt her heart seize. They said the shack was worthless, but they were already measuring the ground beneath it. The official slammed the door shut, face tightening. That's nothing you need to worry about. Jack took a step forward. If this land is abandoned, why are you surveying it at dawn? The man didn't answer. He signaled his team, climbed back into the SUV, and muttered through the open window. You have 24 hours. After that, we will have you removed. The vehicle sped away, scattering gravel across the sand. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same. It pressed against them now, heavy with unspoken threat. Rex stood at the top of the dune, ears forward, body frozen like a statue carved from instinct. The morning light caught his eyes, turning them into two fierce points of amber. Maria whispered, "What did you see, boy?" But Rex didn't blink, didn't breathe. He was staring at the spot where the SUV had come from, as if waiting for the truth to come back. Jack looked at the shack, then at the desert stretching endlessly around them. Something had been buried out here long before they arrived. And Rex had just uncovered the first crack in its silence. By sunrise, the desert felt different. The wind carried a sharpness Jack hadn't noticed the day before, a kind of alertness that made every sound feel louder. Rex had been pacing since dawn, nose to the ground, moving in a tight circle around the shack. He wasn't restless. He was tracking something. Jack stepped outside, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Rex was already digging at a patch of sand near the back wall, sending grains flying with deliberate motions. His ears were pinned forward, his entire body aligned towards the ground, as if the earth itself were whispering to him. "Easy, boy," Jack called. But Rex ignored him, digging faster. Maria stepped out with a tin mug in her hands. "That's the third place he's dug this morning." Jack knelt beside the dog. His hand brushed the sand, then hit something solid. He swept more sand aside and uncovered a slab of concrete, but the color was wrong. Too bright. Too smooth. It didn't match the rest of the shack. Jack frowned. In a place this old, this should be cracked with the rest of it. He scanned the edges. The slab looked like it had been poured within the last few years. Maybe less. Someone had been here long after the shack was supposedly condemned. Rex let out a short bark as if confirming it. Maria had wandered to the north wall, where a busted bookshelf lay half buried in dust. She crouched, lifted one warped plank, and froze. Underneath, wrapped in plastic hardened by heat, was a folded map. She peeled it open. The paper cracked, but held. "Jack, look at this." He joined her. The map was from the Department of Defense, dated in faded ink from the early 90s. A section of desert was circled in red, labeled simply as Restricted Zone 12. Below it, handwritten, Former Test Site, Decommissioned, Entry Prohibited. Maria pointed at a faint mark near the bottom. That's this shack's position. Jack's stomach tightened. If the government shut down a site, everything inside it should have been removed or sealed. But why would someone pour fresh concrete over the shack floor afterward? Rex stiffened suddenly. His head snapped toward the open desert, body tightening like a bowstring. His growl rolled across the sand. An engine approached. Jack moved to the doorway. The same black SUV from yesterday came into view, dust trailing behind it. This time, a second truck followed. Both stopped several yards away. The driver stepped out, adjusting his shirt collar as if he had all the time in the world. "Morning again, Mr. Harlow," the man said, trying to smile. Behind him emerged a man in a bright vest with Sunfield Engineering stitched across the front. He carried a clipboard and a handheld scanner. Jack didn't budge. "You didn't say anything yesterday about bringing a crew." The official spread his hands. "Just routine assessment. This land is unclaimed, completely vacant. We're clearing it for potential development." Rex erupted into a bark so powerful it seemed to shake the air. He lunged forward but didn't bite, planting himself directly between Jack and the Sunfield engineer. His stare locked on the man's equipment, a sharp, unwavering warning. "Sir, your animal is becoming a problem," the Sunfield man snapped. Jack stepped closer to Rex but didn't pull him back. He reacts when people lie. The official's face flickered, only for a second, but Rex caught it. His bark changed pitch, deeper, sharper, like he was naming something the humans refused to say aloud. Maria held up the map. "If this place is vacant, why was the military testing here? Why is this shack marked on a restricted map?" The official stiffened. Old documents, no longer relevant. "Then why is there fresh concrete in a structure that should be abandoned?" Jack asked. The Sunfield engineer stepped forward impatiently. "Look, the shack is worthless. There's nothing under it. No claim, no record, no residence. It is empty." Rex bared his teeth now, but it wasn't aggression. It was revelation. His body angled toward the engineer's scanner, nose twitching. Jack suddenly understood. Rex isn't angry. He's identifying something. Rex lunged again, stopping inches from the engineer's leg, barking directly at the scanner. The engineer stumbled back, nearly dropping it. "Enough!" the official shouted. "You need to restrain your dog." Jack didn't move. "What are you scanning for?" The engineer hesitated. It was only half a second, but it betrayed him. He tucked the scanner behind his clipboard, too quickly to be casual. Maria's voice hardened. "You said this land is useless. Why survey it twice in 24 hours? The official's expression turned cold. "I think we've given you ample warning. You have until sunset. Then the county will enforce removal." They turned without another word. Doors slammed, engines roared, the vehicles pulled away. Rex didn't chase. He stood tall, watching the dust fade across the horizon, jaw tight, breathing rapid with purpose. Jack knelt beside him, placing a hand on the dog's shoulder. "You knew before we did, didn't you?" Rex didn't look at him. He wasn't finished watching the road. Something in that engineer's scanner had triggered him. Something beneath the shack, something fresh, something hidden. Behind them, the desert wind shifted, sweeping a thin layer of sand off the concrete slab Rex had uncovered. For a moment, the sun caught the surface at just the right angle, revealing faint drill marks along the edges. Someone had opened it before. Someone had sealed it again. Jack felt the truth settle like dust in his lungs. They didn't come here because the shack was empty. They came because Rex had found something they thought they buried for good. By late afternoon, the heat had settled into the shack like an unwelcome guest, heavy and unmoving. Jack tried to focus on repairing a warped window frame, but Rex refused to sit still. The dog circled the interior, nose sweeping low, pausing only when the scent told him something the humans couldn't read. Maria knelt beside an overturned crate near the corner where Rex had dug earlier. Dust coated everything, yet some objects felt strangely untouched, as if someone had placed them there not too long ago. She lifted the crate and brushed away the sand beneath it. Something metallic glinted faintly. Rex was already beside her before she touched it. He lowered his head and nudged the buried shape. Jack joined them. He cleared the sand with the edge of his boot until a small cylindrical object rolled free. A spent rifle casing. Maria leaned closer. It wasn't corroded the way metal usually was out here. It looked almost recent, though the stamping was old. Next to it, half buried and worn by grit, was a thin metal tag. Jack picked it up. A name had been punched into the surface. Lieutenant Samuel Dre, U.S. Army. Jack didn't speak for a moment. He turned the tag over carefully, as if it might disappear. The official had said no one ever lived here. No record, no owner. Yet this proved someone not only lived here, but served in the military. Rex nosed the casing again, then whined and paced to the far corner of the shack. He began pouring the sand against the wall. Maria followed with a lantern and spotted a sliver of wood beneath the dirt. She brushed the dust aside, uncovering a small wooden box, sealed by a rusted clasp. Jack pried it open. Inside were letters folded with precision, their edges frayed but intact. On top was one envelope, addressed simply to Lena. Maria unfolded the first letter. The ink had bled in places, but the handwriting was steady. If they come for what I buried, the desert will tell someone else. Not them. Someone who listens. She read silently for a moment, then looked up. Sam knew he was hiding something, Jack. Something he believed the wrong people shouldn't find. Jack felt the weight of the tag in his palm. A missing soldier in a shack officials swore was empty. A slab of concrete poured fresh over who knew what. And a corporation eager to erase whoever stepped near it. This place wasn't abandoned, he said quietly. Someone tried to wipe it clean. Rex suddenly stiffened. His ears snapped toward the west, where dunes sloped into shadow. The dog growled, low and controlled, the kind he used when something alive moved beyond sight. Jack stood, scanning the horizon. "What is it, boy?" Rex bolted outside before Jack finished the sentence. Jack and Maria followed, shielding their eyes from the wind. Rex stood atop a dune, tail rigid, gaze fixed toward the far west. Maria squinted. Tracks, fresh ones, tire marks cutting across the sand in a long arc, leading away from the shack. But something was wrong. The pattern didn't look like normal four-wheel drive marks. The rear tracks wavered, dragging slightly, as if someone had tried to cover their approach or departure by shifting weight. "Someone was out here last night," Maria said. "Or this morning," Jack replied. Rex barked sharply, then started running along the ridge. Jack hurried after him. The tracks curved toward a shallow wash where the sand had been disturbed. Jack crouched, brushing aside a thin crust of hardened grit. Under it lay a broken piece of ground marker flagged with a strip of faded red tape. Sunfield Engineering. He froze. The markers matched the kind surveyors used before drilling or recording subsurface readings. But the county official had insisted no one was authorized to survey this area. Maria touched Jack's shoulder. "You think they were here before us?" Jack tightened his jaw. "Or they were here while we were asleep?" Rex barked again, this time sharper. He stood at the edge of the wash, staring not just at the tracks but beyond them. Maria followed his gaze and saw it, an indentation halfway up a dune, perfectly smooth, suspiciously circular. Not natural. Something heavy had been placed there, then removed. A portable scanner, Jack murmured. The same kind they tried to hide in their SUV. The wind picked up, erasing the edges of the tracks. Time was working against them. Jack took a breath, steadying himself. This isn't just about land. They're looking for what Sam Dre buried. He looked down at Rex. The dog still watched the dune, muscles coiled, breath steady. Something in him knew the truth long before the humans pieced it together. Rex turned back toward the shack and began sprinting downhill, not randomly, with purpose. As if the investigation had only begun, and he already knew where the next clue waited. Maria caught up to Jack, voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. How does he know exactly where to go? Jack watched the dog disappear into the heat shimmer. Because Rex doesn't guess. He remembers what danger smells like, even if it's buried under a foot of sand. When they returned to the shack, the light inside seemed dimmer than before, the air heavier with the truth rising from the floorboards. Jack looked again at the dog tag in his hand. Samuel Dre hadn't abandoned this place. He'd protected it until something forced him to disappear. And now that they were here, Rex was stepping into his role, picking up the trail where Sam left off. As the sun sank, the desert cooled, but Rex stayed at the doorway, staring toward the west dunes. Waiting. Watching. The same wind that once hid the truth was beginning to uncover it, and Rex was the first to hear it shifting. By mid-morning, heat had sharpened, turning the air around the shack into a wavering curtain. Jack was patching a split beam near the doorway when he heard the engines again. This time, there were more of them. 3 SUVs rolled toward the shack in a straight, deliberate line, kicking up a wall of dust behind them. Maria stepped outside, wiping her hands on her jeans. Rex rose from where he had been lying in the shade and stood rigid, tail straight, ears locked forward. He let out a low growl the moment the vehicle stopped. The first SUV door opened. The same county official stepped out, but he was not alone. A man with a polished briefcase and a Sunfield pin on his collar followed him. His expression said he had already made up his mind long before arriving. "Mr. and Mrs. Harlow," he called out, voice rehearsed and cold. "My name is Alan Jessup, legal counsel for Sunfield Development. We are delivering formal notice." Jack crossed his arms. "We already talked to your inspector." Jessup shook his head. "That was a courtesy call. This is a legal one. You have 48 hours to vacate this structure and surrounding land. Sunfield has obtained provisional rights pending final acquisition." His gaze flicked to Maria. Staying here now would constitute unlawful occupation. Maria's pulse quickened. "This land doesn't belong to you." Jessup opened a folder and held out a stack of papers. "As of last month, it does. The county transferred dormant parcels, including this one, to Sunfield for survey and redevelopment. You have no claim." Rex barked suddenly, sharp enough to make the nearest SUV passenger flinch. Jack placed a hand on Rex's back but didn't quiet him. The dog wasn't barking at the men. He was barking at something else, something behind them. One of the Sunfield engineers stepped out of the second SUV with a metal case in hand. He walked to the side of the shack and knelt, pretending to check soil depth. But when he pressed a switch on his handheld reader, Rex snapped his head toward the ground near the man's feet. Jack's eyes narrowed. "Something's running under there." Jessup sighed as if inconvenienced. "Our equipment is standard. Nothing to interest you." But Rex was already sprinting across the sand. He stopped near the northwest corner of the shack and dug with the urgency of a dog smelling smoke. Sand flew in rapid bursts until metal scraped beneath his claws. Maria gasped. Jack knelt beside Rex and brushed the remaining sand away. What emerged was not debris or junk. It was a compact seismic sensor, its screen fully powered, pulsing with real-time data. "This isn't abandoned equipment," Jack said. "This is live." He turned the device over. Sunfield branding gleamed along the casing. The engineer froze. Jessup stepped forward too quickly. "Please step away from that." Jack pushed to his feet. "Why is this running beneath a shack you say is worthless?" Jessup's voice tightened. "Our surveys are authorized. You are interfering with ongoing assessment. Remove yourselves." Maria held up the sensor. "Assessing what?" "Bedrock stability doesn't require high-resolution seismic mapping. This kind of equipment is used to detect cavities, anomalies." Jessup's jaw clenched. "Put that down, ma'am. That is proprietary." Rex barked again, but this time it wasn't aggression. It was urgency. He ran in a straight line from the device towards the southern dunes, stopped, then ran back, repeating the path twice. Jack recognized the behavior. Rex had used it during searches years ago. Pattern mapping, indicating a target below the ground. Maria's voice lowered. "Jack, he's showing us a direction." Rex stopped in front of them and pressed his nose into the sand, pouring until a thin, echoing sound came back. Not hollow exactly. Something else, something buried deep. Jack's stomach tightened. "They aren't here for the shack." Jessup snapped his briefcase shut. "You have 48 hours. After that, sheriff deputies will escort you out." He signaled his men. "Let's go." But before the SUVs rolled away, Rex did something he had never done before. He ran up to the lead vehicle, planted himself in front of it, and stared through the windshield at the driver until the engine revved impatiently. The county official lowered the window. "Get your dog out of the way." Rex didn't move. His stare didn't blink. Jack stepped forward slowly. "Rex, come." Rex held his ground for another heartbeat. Then he backed away and returned to the Harlows, but his body stayed angled at the vehicles as they drove off, as if memorizing every detail about the men inside. When the dust finally settled, the desert returned to silence, but it didn't feel empty. It felt watched. Maria crouched beside the seismic sensor, still half buried in sand. "Someone put this here to monitor what's below us." "Not the surface." Jack looked toward the dunes where Rex had traced his line. Buried anomalies, cavities, maybe tunnels, maybe something sealed. Something Sam Dre died protecting. Maria held the folded letter they found earlier, the one with the line that now felt heavier than the desert heat. "If they come for what I buried, the desert will tell someone else." Not them. Someone who listens. Rex stood at the threshold of the shack, eyes fixed on the horizon, body taut with instinct. He was not restless. He was reading the land the way soldiers read maps. Jack exhaled. They thought they could hide it with concrete, with silence, with lies. Maria touched his arm, but Rex found the truth first. Jack nodded. "Sunfield is not chasing us. They're chasing whatever is beneath this shack. And Sam Dre tried to keep it from them." In the stillness, the desert seemed to shift, like a secret about to break open. Rex lifted his head, nose to the wind, listening to something only he could hear. Someone buried a truth out here, and someone else was trying to bury it again. Night fell without ceremony, slipping across the Mojave like ink. The shack creaked with the shift in temperature, the boards contracting, the metal roof ticking. Jack and Maria sat close to the lantern, studying the letters they had found, tracing the loops of Sam Dre's handwriting like clues carved into stone. Rex lay near the doorway, alert despite the long day, ears lifting at every leafless rustle. Jack had grown used to his vigilance, but tonight Rex's stillness felt sharper, like he was waiting for something he already sensed coming. Maria looked up from the letters. He talked about shadows moving across the dunes, people searching at night. He knew he was being watched. Jack rubbed his forehead. And now we're the ones in his place. Before Maria could respond, Rex surged to his feet. His bark cracked through the shack like a warning shot. Jack stood instantly, grabbing the lantern and rushing to the doorway. Headlights, at least 3 sets, creeping across the sand with their beams dimmed. Engines humming low, too controlled to be accidental. Sunfield survey trucks. Maria's breath caught. They came back. Rex growled, the sound deeper than Jack had ever heard from him. Jack pushed through the door. "You can't be here. You have no right to enter at night." The men didn't answer. They carried cases, sleek and polished, nothing like the dusty tools used for normal survey work. One man lifted a device shaped like a pistol, its barrel wide and metallic. Jack stepped back. "What is that?" The man didn't look at him. He pointed the device at Rex. A pulse erupted, silent to human ears but powerful enough to vibrate the sand. Rex reeled backward, paws scrambling, ears pinned as if someone had stabbed the air. The dog collapsed to his side, whining, eyes squeezed shut. Maria screamed. Jack lunged forward, grabbing a handful of the man's jacket. "What did you do? That's a living being!" The man shoved him back. "Then keep him restrained. We have clearance." Maria knelt beside Rex, stroking his face. His muscles twitched, breath ragged. The device had hit him hard. Too hard. A second man raised another unit. "Keep them inside. We just need the readings." Jack's fury broke through the shock. He charged forward, grabbing the device and wrenching it downward. "You don't get to terrorize my dog on land that isn't yours." The man stumbled, startled that Jack fought back. But the third man stepped between them, lifting his hand in a halting gesture. "Enough." "They get the message." He shot a look to the others. "Pull the equipment. We'll finish from a distance." Maria held Rex, whispering to him as if her voice alone could anchor him. "You're here, boy. You're here. Stay with me." The men retreated, disappointed but not afraid, as if they believed time itself was on their side. Their engines growled back to life, moving across the desert like predators slipping into shadow. Jack slammed the door behind them, then dropped to his knees beside Rex. The dog blinked slowly, his breath finally beginning to steady. Jack placed a trembling hand on his fur. "I'm done with this." He looked at Maria. "They attacked him. They're going to keep coming. We can pack up in the morning and head east, find somewhere quiet." Maria's eyes filled, not with fear, but with something heavier. "If we leave, Sam's truth dies with us. They tried to erase him, and now they'll bury whatever he died protecting." She touched Rex's shoulder, her voice cracking. "And they'll come back for anyone else who stumbles too close." Jack turned his face away, jaw locked. He had carried anger through most of his life, but this was different. This was helplessness. He hated it. Hated knowing the people with money and power could strike without consequence. Hated watching Rex suffer for a truth he didn't yet fully understand. But Maria wasn't finished. Jack. Look at him. Jack did. Rex was trying to stand. His legs trembled, but he pushed through the pain, bracing himself. Jack reached out to steady him, but Rex shook off the support. He walked to the doorway, posture stiff, head lifted. He stood guard again, just as he had before the attack. His body said what words could not. He wasn't leaving. Jack swallowed hard. He placed a hand on the dog's back. "You're hurt, buddy. You don't have to be strong right now." But Rex only stared out into the desert night, watching the fading glow on the horizon where the Sunfield trucks had driven away. Maria stepped beside Jack. "He's not giving up, not until we finish what he started." Jack closed his eyes. When he opened them, something inside had settled. Not calm, not peace. Something closer to resolve. The same feeling he had the day he enlisted, when he realized some lines weren't meant to be crossed. "They hurt him," he said quietly, "and still he's standing. If he's willing to fight for this place, so am I." Maria nodded. "Then we stay, and we see this through, whatever it is." Rex exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled breath, almost like acknowledgement. He eased down into a crouch beside the doorway, the perfect silhouette of a sentinel reclaiming his post. Jack rested a hand on the wooden frame of the shack, feeling the weight of the night settle around them. Somewhere under the sand lay the truth Sam Dre died protecting. Somewhere in Sunfield's files lay the reason they were willing to cross lines, even hurt a dog to keep it secret. The desert wind pushed softly against the shack, as if urging them forward. They would face danger. They would face the law, but they would not face it alone. Rex stood guard, even through the pain, and that decided everything. The hearing room at the Clark County Courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and desert dust, the kind that blew in on the cuffs of uniforms and never quite left. Jack and Maria sat shoulder to shoulder at the petitioner's table, their hands clasped under the wood. Rex lay at their feet, ribs rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. His injury from the sonic device had left his gait stiff, but his eyes were sharp again, watching, reading the room the way only a dog who has survived hardship can. On the other side sat Sunfield's legal team. Polished suits, clean nails, expressions that suggested the outcome had been decided long before today. In front of them stood a display board titled Parcel 19B Status Report. The judge, a weathered woman with steel-grey hair and a reputation for intolerance toward corporate games, adjusted her glasses. "We will hear Sunfield's evidence first. Please proceed." Their lead attorney, McRaven, rose. He was tall, thin, and far too confident. "Your Honor, we have clear documentation that Parcel 19B, colloquially known as the Desert Shack, was abandoned for decades and therefore reverted to county ownership. The land was legally transferred to Sunfield under the Desert Refurbishment Act." He handed up a thick binder of maps, signatures, and dates. The judge flipped through the pages, expression unreadable. Maria whispered to Jack. "The maps look too perfect, too convenient." Jack nodded but kept quiet. McRaven continued. "The structure itself is condemned and unclaimed. There is no record of a Sam Dre owning or maintaining it. No heir, no deed, no purpose for preservation. The county and Sunfield are aligned in this." Rex's ears curled slightly at the sound of McRaven's voice, his muscles contracting as if bracing for impact. Then came the detail that made Jack's stomach drop. McRaven unfurled a large map showing clean borders around the shack. "Notice the lack of registered military easements or preservation filings. The land is void of historical significance." Maria whispered sharply. "That's impossible. The letters. Sam's forms." Jack felt Rex shift at their feet, restless. The judge closed the binder. "Does the petitioner wish to respond?" Jack rose. He didn't have a lawyer, didn't have polished notes, didn't have anything except truth. And Rex. "Your Honor, the land wasn't abandoned. It was lived on by Lieutenant Samuel Dre, U.S. Army. We have his dog tags, his letters, his handwriting. He petitioned for land preservation. And we found his map." McRaven cut in. "Found, yes. Submitted legally? No. And unverifiable. Anyone can forge," Rex barked once, loud enough to stop McRaven mid-sentence. The courtroom jumped. The judge frowned. "Control your dog, Mr. Hayes." But Rex wasn't launching at McRaven. He was staring at the far door, body rigid, tail stiff, ears pinned forward with laser focus. A Sunfield employee had just slipped in, clutching a rolled tube of maps. He walked briskly toward McRaven as if late for an assignment. Rex growled low, a sound that vibrated the floor. Jack looked between the dog and the man. Something was wrong. Rex lunged forward, stopping inches from the employee's leg, standing between him and the defense table. Not attacking, blocking, warning. The courtroom erupted. A bailiff rushed forward, but the judge raised her hand. Hold. The employee froze, sweat forming under his collar. His grip tightened on the map tube. The judge's voice hardened. Sir, step forward. Slowly. The man stiffened, then reluctantly obeyed. What's inside the tube? Just zoning overlays, he muttered. Open it. McRaven shot him a glare. You weren't instructed to bring anything additional. The tech swallowed hard and unrolled the map. But it wasn't the map Sunfield had submitted earlier. It was an older copy. Weathered. Stamped with a military insignia. The corners were brittle, the ink faded, but legible. And it showed something Sunfield had tried to erase. A restricted testing zone beneath Parcel 19B with a handwritten note. Request for environmental preservation filed by Lieutenant Samuel Dre. Pending military review. The judge's eyes narrowed. This contradicts the map you submitted earlier. One shows no easements. This one clearly does. Why the discrepancy? McRaven stammered. That map is obsolete. It was misclassified. Jack stepped forward. Your Honor, they hid the real map. Lieutenant Dre filed the request. Sam didn't abandon the shack. He was trying to protect what was underneath it. The judge tapped a finger on the preserved map. And what exactly is underneath it? Jack hesitated. We don't know. But Sunfield does. Maria spoke softly but clearly. They've been surveying illegally, using seismic sensors. They hurt Rex trying to force us off the land. The bailiff turned the map tube over to check for additional documents. A small USB drive fell out, clattering onto the courtroom floor. The tech's face went pale. The judge leaned forward. What is that? The tech swallowed and looked at Jack, not his employer. I'm sorry, he whispered. I couldn't watch them do this again. The USB has everything. Internal emails, orders to alter public records, proof that the shack was flagged as a preservation zone because of the forgotten test site. Sunfield wants the mineral rights under it. Millions worth. McRaven slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. This man isn't authorized to speak. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. He is now. She gestured to the bailiff. Retrieve the drive. Maria squeezed Jack's hand, her eyes welling. Rex sat between them, chest lifted, gaze unwavering, as if he knew he had pulled the truth into the light. The judge took a breath, her expression hardening like stone. Sunfield knowingly submitted altered documents. You attempted to suppress evidence of a military preservation request and endangered civilians. Her gavel struck with finality. The petitioner's claim stands. Parcel 19B remains under the protection of the Dre Preservation Order. Sunfield is hereby barred from activity on the land pending federal review. Jack exhaled shakily. Maria covered her mouth. Rex leaned against Jack's leg, steady, grounded, the heartbeat of the moment. The judge wasn't finished. And one more thing. Without that dog, this deception might never have been uncovered. This court acknowledges his role in bringing forward the truth. Rex lifted his head as if accepting the statement. Outside the courtroom, the desert sunlight felt different. Brighter. Warmer. Honest. Jack knelt and cupped Rex's face. You saved all of us, buddy, again. Rex held his gaze, calm and resolute, as if reminding him that the fight wasn't over. But the truth was no longer buried. It had teeth, and a guardian who refused to step aside. The ink on the judge's ruling was barely dry when the courthouse doors swung open and sunlight washed across the steps. Jack, Maria, and Rex stepped out together, not triumphant, but stunned. The kind of stunned that follows a storm you weren't sure you'd survive. Reporters tried shouting questions. Sunfield's team scattered in tight, tense clusters, but none of that mattered, because the truth had broken through, and Rex had been the first to sense it. Maria knelt on the courthouse steps and pressed her forehead to Rex's. "You did it, boy. You pulled the truth out of hiding." Rex didn't puff up or prance. He simply leaned into her touch, steady and humble, as if the world had only just caught up to what he already knew. Jack placed a hand on Rex's back. "Let's go home. Sam's home." They drove into Sagebrush Flats under a wide blue sky streaked with white heat. The desert somehow felt different. Not safer, not softer, but honest. A place that was no longer trying to hide someone else's secrets. At the turnoff toward the shack, a small group of locals waited near the dusty road. Farmers, mechanics, a teacher Jack barely remembered meeting once outside the feed store. They stood beside their trucks holding crates, toolboxes, and 2 coolers packed tight with ice. When Jack stepped out of the pickup, a man in a denim jacket approached him. "Name's Harris. We heard what you two did. Or tried to do. Figured you shouldn't do it alone." Maria blinked. "You don't even know us." Harris shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Folks around here know when someone stands up to a corporation that thinks it owns the desert. They also know when a dog saves the day." He looked down at Rex. "And that one did more than any of us." Rex held the man's gaze, calm but watchful. Harris smiled. "Guess he's checking if I'm lying." Smart dog. The others unloaded what they'd brought. Planks of treated lumber, boxes of canned goods, water jugs, a tarp big enough to shade half the shack. A grandmotherly woman handed Maria a loaf of fresh bread wrapped in a dish towel, whispering, "The desert doesn't forget loyalty. My husband served with men like Sam." Jack felt something tighten in his throat, a kind of gratitude that didn't fit neatly into words. The shack came into view around the ridge. Sunlight hit the windows in sharp angles. The board still leaned, the roof sagged. The paint was more dust than color. But now it wasn't just a broken remnant. It was a place with witnesses and protectors. A place with a second chance. Federal officers arrived the next morning, their vehicles humming against the silence. Not the threatening Sunfield kind, but calm, procedural. They cordoned off a square of land behind the shack and placed a notice of Federal Review sign in the sand. Maria stood beside one of the officers as he documented the area. "So Sam really filed for preservation?" He nodded. The military confirmed the test site wasn't dangerous anymore, but it held historical value. Sam Dre wanted it protected, not mined. Sunfield had no right to touch it. Jack asked, "What happens now? We open a criminal inquiry, document tampering, illegal surveying, attempted land fraud. Might take months, but it'll stick." When they left, the desert became quiet again. Jack and Maria walked through the shack slowly, like caretakers entering a sacred place. The letters they'd found were still on the table. Sam's handwriting, steady and careful, seemed to echo across the walls. Maria whispered, "He didn't just want a roof. He wanted the truth kept alive." Jack nodded. "And now we're the ones holding it." Outside, Rex was patrolling the perimeter of the shack. Not tense, but purposeful. He paused near the foundation, stared out across the dunes, then lifted his head toward the wind as if he were reading currents no human could understand. Maria touched Jack's arm. "Look at him. He's guarding the place like it's always been his." Jack watched Rex claim each inch of the land with quiet certainty. He's not guarding the shack. He's guarding the story. The afternoon brought more visitors. A teenage girl with a cracked skateboard. A cowboy-hatted rancher. Even the quiet librarian from town. They dropped off gloves, rope, blankets, old tools, and food that tasted better than it looked. But they brought something else too. Validation. Someone taped a handwritten note to the shack's door. For Sam Dre, for the Hayes family. For Rex, the dog who wouldn't let a lie through the door, Maria folded the note like it was made of glass. Near sunset, Jack hammered a new plank into the porch railing. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about the shack was. But the sound of the hammer felt like a heartbeat, a rhythm returning after years of being silent. Maria swept sand from the floor, letting the wind take it back into the desert. She wasn't cleaning. She was clearing space for healing. Rex, exhausted from the day's visitors, lay in the doorway, head on his paws, eyes half closed, but still watching everything. Every shadow, every shift in the light. Jack sat beside him. "You okay, boy?" Rex exhaled slowly, a breath that carried certainty. Jack scratched behind his ears. "You're part of this fight as much as we are." Maria stood in the doorway, the sunset burning orange behind her. She smiled gently. "No." He started it. They stayed like that until the last strip of daylight slipped beneath the desert floor. The shack that once felt abandoned now glowed with life. For the first time since they had arrived in the Mojave, Jack didn't feel lost. Maria didn't feel invisible. Rex didn't feel alone. Justice had begun. Healing had begun. And somewhere, in a chapter he never got to finish, Sam Dre would have been proud. 6 months passed, though in the Mojave time didn't move the way it did everywhere else. Days melted into one another, sun to dusk, dusk to moonlight. But the shack that once sagged like a forgotten memory now stood with a posture almost proud. The restoration hadn't been a miracle. It had been sweat, stubbornness, and the kind of help that shows up when people believe a story deserves to live. Locals brought scrap metal, weathered beams, leftover solar panels. A retired carpenter drove out twice a week to help Jack level the frame. Someone donated a water drum. Someone else built a makeshift windbreak. Kids painted the window frames with bright desert colors that refused to fade. The shack wasn't fancy. It wasn't new, but it breathed again. Maria stood at the doorway of what was now called the desert table, a name she'd written on a driftwood plank, with black paint that kept flaking no matter how many coats she added. Inside, she stirred a pot of stew that smelled like cumin, tomatoes, and warmth. Travelers passing through Sagebrush Flats always hesitated the first time they stepped inside. They expected a business. Instead, they got a seat, a bowl, and Maria's quiet smile. "No charge," she always said when someone reached for their wallet. "The desert's taken enough from folks. Let it give something back for once." Some guests came only once. Others returned week after week, seeking a meal or a moment of peace. Truck drivers, hikers, a mother fleeing a hard night, a rancher bringing the last onions from his winter harvest. Maria didn't pry. She didn't preach. She just cooked, listened, and let the desert do whatever healing it had in mind. Jack spent most of his days at the far end of the shack, where a small shaded area became his unofficial workshop. If it had wires, gears, or an engine cough, he'd fix it. Generators that sputtered in the heat, ATV engines choked with dust, an old swamp cooler that hadn't run since the Clinton administration. People paid him however they could. Tools, fresh eggs, half-broken parts he could repurpose. Sometimes just a handshake. It wasn't money that mattered, it was being useful again. It was having hands that made something better instead of holding regret. But the one who changed most over those months wasn't Jack or Maria. It was Rex. He had been just their dog when they arrived in the Mojave, their protector, their only constant. Now he belonged to the desert too, and the desert seemed to acknowledge it. Kids in town had started calling him the dog who saw what humans missed. The sign someone taped to the bulletin board outside the feed store showed Rex standing alert in the wind, sand swirling behind him like a myth being written in real time. Rex didn't bask in the attention. He didn't understand it the way humans tried to. He simply accepted it with the calm certainty of a creature who'd always known what mattered: truth, safety, and the people who loved him. Every morning he made his rounds, paws sinking into the sand with a measured rhythm. He'd trot the perimeter of the shack, nose to the ground, tail level, checking for new scents or disturbances. He knew every shift in the wind, every coyote trail, every unfamiliar tread on the dirt. He also knew who needed him. One afternoon, a teenager named Wyatt collapsed near the desert table after walking through the heat longer than he should have. Before anyone noticed, Rex was at his side, nudging his hand, barking once sharp enough to cut through Maria's conversation inside. They got to Wyatt in time. Later, the boy told his mother, "I didn't know what was wrong." But Rex did. Stories like that spread until no one could tell which parts were fact and which had already turned into legend. But no one questioned the root of it. Rex had become something bigger than a pet. He was a guardian. Late one evening, when the sun dipped behind a line of red rock, the sky blushed purple. Jack sat on the rebuilt porch, wiping dust from his hands. Maria joined him, carrying 2 mugs of weak coffee. She looked at the glowing horizon. "I never thought we'd find peace in a place like this." Jack nodded. "Me neither." He paused, watching Rex lying beside the steps, eyes half closed, but ears still tuned to the slightest sound. "But maybe we didn't find it. Maybe Rex dragged us to it." Maria laughed softly. "Sounds about right." Silence stretched between them, not empty but full, the kind of silence that felt earned. Then, without warning, Rex's head lifted. His ears pricked forward. His body stiffened, not fear, not alarm, but focus. He stared into the desert as if something had shifted far away, something small but meaningful. Jack followed his gaze, but the horizon looked the same. Wind brushing the sand. Shadows lengthening. Nothing obvious. "You see something, boy?" Jack murmured. Rex didn't move, didn't blink. Maria whispered, "He's remembering. Or maybe he's sensing something new." Rex finally exhaled and laid his head down again, satisfied. Jack leaned back, letting the desert breeze cool the sweat from his neck. 6 months ago, this place was a threat, a battle. Now it was home. A strange home. A hard home. But one that felt chosen, not forced. Maria rested her head on Jack's shoulder. "Do you think Sam Dre would have approved?" Jack watched the last light fade over the dunes. "Yeah. I think he'd say the desert finally found the right people." Rex thumped his tail once, slow and sure, as if agreeing. The night settled in. Stars pricked the sky. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance, their voices rolling across the dunes like a forgotten hymn. Jack didn't tense the way he used to. Maria didn't grip her mug. Rex didn't rise to guard. The desert wasn't warning them anymore. It was welcoming them. And in the quiet aftermath of everything they had fought, everything they had survived, the shack felt not like a refuge from danger, but a promise of what healing looked like when people, and one extraordinary dog, refused to turn away from the truth buried beneath the sand. The desert morning came in slow, warm breaths, carrying the scent of creosote and dust that had settled during the night. Jack was tightening the last bolt on a refurbished generator when he noticed a figure walking towards the shack. Not driving. Walking. The kind of approach that meant the person wasn't lost. He was intentional. The young man wore a canvas backpack, a sun-bleached baseball cap, and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He paused a few yards from Rex, who was sprawled beneath the shade awning. Rex didn't bark. He didn't stand. He simply lifted his head and stared, the way he always did when deciding who someone truly was. The young man froze. Then he whispered, as if confessing, "I'm not here to cause trouble." Rex blinked once. Then he laid his head back down. Maria stepped out of the kitchen space. "You look like you walked a long way." "Need water?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." "I'm Evan Morales. I'm a journalism student from UNLV. I emailed last week. I'm here to write about, well, all of this." Jack wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Thought you'd be driving." "My car quit 2 miles back," Evan admitted. "But I figured if you two could rebuild a whole shack with spare parts, I could walk the last stretch." That earned a small laugh from Maria. Inside, Evan took a seat at the table, notebook already open, pen uncapped. He wasn't the type to ease into things. His questions came quick but careful, like he understood he was handling something fragile. "How did you end up here? What really happened with Sunfield? What was the court case like? Why did the town rally around you?" Jack answered most of them slowly, taking his time, trying not to turn any of it into a performance. The desert didn't tolerate exaggeration. But Evan kept glancing at Rex, who lay near the doorway with his chin resting on his paws, listening as though every word mattered. Finally, Evan closed his notebook, hesitated, then asked the question he really wanted. Why did Rex keep digging that first day? What did he know? Jack leaned back, the old chair creaking beneath him. He didn't smile, didn't dramatize it. He simply looked at Evan with a calm that came from surviving something hard and walking out the other side intact. "He never digs for trouble," Jack said. "He digs for the truth people bury." The room went still after that. Not quiet, but still, like even the desert paused to listen. Evan swallowed. That's going in the article exactly as you said it." Jack shrugged. "It's not a line. It's just who he is." Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, as if acknowledging the words but refusing to make a big show of it. The interview lasted another hour. Evan asked about Sam Dre, about the hidden letters, about the seismic device buried under the sand. He asked about the night Sunfield's crew tried to intimidate them. And he asked about the day in court when Rex had stepped between a lie and the law. Toward the end, Evan stopped writing and simply looked around. "You know, people don't really believe in places like this anymore," he said softly. "Or in people like you, or dogs like him. They think everything's too far gone to matter." Maria rested her hand on the table. "Maybe that's why you're here, to tell them it isn't." Evan nodded, throat tight, and packed his notebook away. Before he left, he crouched beside Rex. The dog didn't move at first, then leaned forward just enough to sniff the brim of Evan's hat. It wasn't approval. It was something quieter. Recognition. A few hours later, Evan hitched a ride back toward town on an old rancher's truck. That night, the generator hummed, the desert breeze pushed through the shack's patched windows, and Jack and Maria sat outside while Rex lay between them. The stars burned sharp above the ridgeline. "You think anyone will care about his story?" Maria asked. Jack glanced down at Rex. "They will if they've ever needed a reason to believe something good can still happen." Maria smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. 2 days later, everything changed. Evan's article exploded across the internet. Not in the viral way that burns out in a day, but in the slow, inevitable way truth spreads when people recognize themselves in it. Photos of Rex standing before the shack. A quote pulled into bold letters. "He digs for the truth people bury." Comments poured in. Veterans thanking Sam Dre. Families thanking Rex. Strangers writing about their own dogs, their own battles, their own buried truths. Someone started calling the shack a symbol of loyalty. Someone else called it a stand for justice. And a woman from Idaho mailed a small metal tag engraved with a single line. For the dog who remembered. Within a week, hikers came to leave small tokens at the porch. Dog tags, wristbands, notes folded neatly under stones. A firefighter from Arizona drove miles just to shake Jack's hand. A mother brought her son who had survived a car accident thanks to his own dog's alert bark. And every time, Rex stepped forward, not to claim attention, but to witness it, to honor it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sand blood orange, Jack picked up a newspaper someone had left by the water drum. The headline read, "The Shack That Stayed Standing, the Dog Who Wouldn't Look Away." Jack read it twice, then a third time. Maria joined him on the steps. "It's bigger than us now." Jack nodded. "Feels like it belongs to the desert, and to him." Rex, stretched out beside them, lifted his head and scanned the horizon. The wind shifted. Sand curled across the ground in thin spirals, and Rex watched it all, with the quiet certainty of someone guarding more than a place. He was guarding a legacy forged in truth, carried by the desert, and remembered by every person who had ever needed hope. The desert sunset wasn't subtle that evening. It fell across the Mojave like molten copper, spilling over the dunes, brushing the ridgelines with fire, and settling into the cracks of the old shack as if it were painting every piece of wood with memory. Rex lay on the top step, paws stretched out, chest rising in a calm rhythm. He wasn't young anymore. His muzzle carried new grey, a shade that matched the dust of the desert he'd come to patrol like a silent sentinel. But his eyes, those amber, thinking eyes, held the same sharpness they had the day he led Jack and Maria to this forgotten place. Maria leaned against the porch railing, arms folded lightly, watching the horizon. Jack hammered the last nail into a frame he'd built for Sam Dre's portrait, which Evan had printed from one of the recovered photos and laminated to protect it from the sand. Evan returned just as the sky turned purple. He carried a camera slung around his neck and a notebook tucked in his back pocket, a look of awe permanently etched onto his face, as though every trip to the shack rewrote something inside him. "I still can't believe a place like this exists," he said quietly. Maria smiled without looking away from the dunes. "It didn't exist this way before. You all made it what it is." Rex gave a low chuff, as if correcting her. Evan sat on the step below him. "You think Sam Dre meant for someone like you to find this place?" Maria glanced down at Rex, who watched the desert with a stillness that felt almost ancient. "I think the desert chooses who it trusts," she said. "And Rex, he just listens better than we do." Evan nodded slowly, as if that answered much more than the question he had asked. Jack joined them, brushing sawdust from his hands. He looked across the fading light, the dunes rolling like quiet waves, the sky split wide open, the wind whispering through the creosote bushes. "You ever notice how this place always feels like it's holding its breath?" he asked. Evan lifted his camera, only with him around. He tilted the lens toward Rex. Rex didn't pose, didn't puff up. He simply remained as he was, present, aware, grounded in a way no human ever could be. Small gusts of wind stirred the sand near the steps. Not harsh, not cold. Just enough to remind them the desert kept its own secrets, and that some of them would remain buried forever under its shifting surface. But not the ones Rex had found, not the ones they had fought to protect. Evan lifted the camera again. "Mind if I get one more?" for the article update. Jack shrugged. "As long as you get Rex's good side." Rex flicked an ear. Evan snapped the photo. The camera clicked again, and again, until he finally lowered it. "People are already calling this place the Desert Stand," he said softly. "A symbol of truth, loyalty, and maybe second chances." Maria's eyes softened. "Maybe that last one is the most important." Jack looked toward the shack, toward the repaired porch, the patched roof, the framed letters on the wall inside, the small memorial they'd built for Sam Dre beneath the old Joshua tree. This wasn't just a home. It had become a quiet testament to everyone who had ever been overlooked, pushed aside, forgotten, and found strength again in the most unlikely of ways. Rex suddenly lifted his head, his ears sharpened, almost slicing through the air, his nose lifted, his eyes locked onto a point in the distance, nothing visible to them, but clearly something to him. Jack whispered, "You see something, boy?" Rex didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then he exhaled once and relaxed, laying his head back down as if whatever he sensed wasn't danger, just another truth drifting through the desert. Maria looked at him with a small, knowing smile. He'll always hear things before we do. The wind picked up, curling over the dunes, carrying the day's last heat out into the open plains. The sky dimmed to a muted violet. Coyotes began their distant chorus, and still Rex stayed at the top step, guarding, not out of duty but out of instinct, as if this land had chosen him as much as he had chosen it. Evan packed his things slowly, reluctant to leave. Before he stepped off the porch, he turned back. "There's one last thing I want to add to the article. Something I hope people hear." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Evan looked at Rex, and then at the desert stretching endlessly behind him. "Some truths don't survive unless someone loyal keeps watch." Jack swallowed. Maria nodded. Rex blinked once, accepting the compliment without ceremony. Evan stepped into the sand, heading toward the road before the darkness made paths disappear. Jack and Maria stayed on the porch beside Rex, watching the night take shape around them. The desert didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of lives and choices and quiet victories that didn't need applause to matter. Rex shifted, inching closer to Maria's foot. She reached down and brushed her fingers along his fur. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't move, but his tail tapped once against the step. The camera would fade out here, pulling back slowly, letting the shack become a warm ember in the middle of the vast Mojave night. The wind swept over the sand like a whisper, carrying stories that would outlive all of them. And then the narrator would speak, soft and steady. If you've ever loved a dog who guarded your truth, your home, or your heart, if you've ever been saved by instincts sharper than fear, if you've ever believed loyalty could change a life, what's your story with a loyal pet? Share it below, and if Rex's journey moved you, consider supporting German Shepherd, where every story honors the dogs who still listen to the things we humans forget to hear.